Well, good morning, everyone. It's Wednesday, and boy, do we have an interesting show for you today. We're going to look at what I believe is one of the most interesting, in many ways, people in the Bible. Certainly, we're in Hebrews chapter 11 this week. We're studying this important chapter in depth, although we're skipping over all the individuals that God names that have lived exemplary lives of faith. And we're doing that, concentrating on other passages that are in this chapter. That is, except for today. Today I want to look at the most unique one who is listed in the Hall of Faith. And that person's name is Rahab. Now, Rahab is unique in this list for a couple of reasons. One, she's the only woman listed by name. There's other women listed, and we're actually going to come to some of those in the next 2 days. But Rahab is mentioned by name. In addition to that, Rahab was a prostitute. You say, a prostitute? A person who's living a life of sin is listed as one of the most faithful, or the people living most by faith? Evidently so. Isn't that interesting? I find it interesting. Why I want to talk about her today is I just think she's such a prime example of God's grace and God's forgiveness. In Hebrews 11, she is mentioned in verse 31. And it says, by faith, the prostitute Rahab, because she welcomed the spies, was not killed with those who were disobedient. So what does that mean? What's she talking about? Well, in Joshua chapter 2, we come to that part of the Bible that talks about Rahab and her incident and how she expressed her faith. If you recall, the Israelites had crossed into the Promised Land. But before they went west of the Jordan, Joshua sent in 2 spies. He wanted to know what kind of opposition they would be facing once they went in. And the major city that they had to conquer was Jericho. And you remember the story of Jericho. They do conquer Jericho. And they did it in a most unique way of marching around it for 7 days, and then there were other things they were to do, and then God caused the walls to fall down, and they could march right in and take the city. But prior to any of that happening, Joshua sent in 2 spies. And when they got inside of Jericho, the city evidently found out that they were there. And of course, if you find that your enemy has sent spies in to your city, you'd want to do what? You'd want to catch them and kill them. And that's exactly what happened. So they didn't know where to go and hide, but Rahab takes them in. Maybe that wasn't, if she was welcoming other men, maybe it just seemed nothing out of the unusual to her neighbors that 2 men went in to be with her there. But she wasn't like that. It was more, let me read a little bit about what happened. And in Joshua chapter 2, now they are already in there, and this is when Rahab expresses her faith in the God of the Bible. Verse 8, Joshua chapter 2, verse 8. Before the spies lay down for the night, she went up on the roof and said to them, I know that the Lord has given this land to you, and that a great fear of you has fallen on us, so that all who live in this country are melting in fear because of you. So she's going to plead for her life in light of that she already had the faith that they were going to conquer the city. And so she makes a deal, I'll hide you, but would you please spare my life in that of my family. And they do make that agreement. And you should read all about that, the way that that would come down and that would be signaled to them. But again, in verse 11 of Joshua chapter 2, she again expresses, you can see that it was a saving faith that she had come to have in God. She says, when we heard, those in Jericho, heard of it, our hearts melted and everyone's courage failed because of you. And here's the key, for the Lord your God is God in heaven above and on earth below. That was her declaration of faith. And evidently, that's all God just wants. People who will love Him. For the Lord your God is God in heaven above and on earth below. That's all it took. Now, we learn from the book of James that a true faith will express itself in actions. You don't earn salvation by those actions. You earn salvation, you gain salvation by following Christ and following God. And that's what Rahab did. Now, she did express her faith by putting her whole family, herself and her family, at risk by hiding those spies. But she had that saving faith that you and I need to have. So desperately true. Faith leads to action, and it did for her. You know, sometimes we say, but I'm just not worthy. Lord God, I'm not worthy to represent you to this world. Or I let you down, or I do this sin or that sin, or whatever it might be. We have a low opinion of ourselves sometimes. God, remember this. God looks at the heart, your heart, not at what's on the outside. Aren't we glad of that? God looks at our heart. And that's what He did. He looked at Rahab's heart. He looked at Rahab's heart. And what He saw was a person of faith. A person of faith. Now, one of the most interesting things about Rahab, if it wasn't already enough that what we had, I'm just so grateful that this is an illustration. God puts her in the hall of faith. Just for that one expression, she had faith in the God of the Bible. She knew He existed, and she asked to be a part of His family. Isn't that amazing? Well, she not only was that, but she was in the line of Jesus. Can you imagine? She was in the line of Jesus. How do we know that? In Matthew chapter 1, where it says the genealogy of Jesus Christ, the son of David, the son of Abraham. And then it goes through and lists out those who were His, great grandparents? Verse 5, Salmon, the father of Boaz, whose mother was Rahab. And Boaz, the father of Abraham, and it goes on, right down to Jesus. It seems that Salmon, the father of Boaz, was married to Rahab. So Rahab got out of Jericho, goes on to marry Salmon, and that's the great-great-grandmother of Jesus. Isn't God good? Well, we got to go for today. We have another extremely interesting passage for tomorrow. I hope to see you then. God bless. Ponder on these things.
Beautiful day. It's wonderful. This is the day that the